So here, excuse me, we're set up for the third of the wars, and things do not look at all good for the Terrans. Kind of got this last-ditch effort with a bunch of monitors and missile boats. Basically, an economy of force type situation. They're hoping that the Imperials break themselves on the assault on Terra. They still own a planet in Alpha Centauri system, so it's conceivable that if that's not defeated, even though it's not producing still, if that's not defeated, that it might return to the fold, as it were. But the current Teran force has just about no chance. It's not designed to attack, and it's designed to break the Imperial force. We'll see what happens. If they do break the Imperial force, they may be able to put out something attack-worthy, depending on what happens, because the Imperials are not building for defense at all. Although they do have a monitor. So, I don't know. But they don't have anything back here. So, if there's a victory, the Terrans could build a refueler, a tanker, and make an attack back this way. I don't think that's going to happen, though. I think the best that the Terrans can hope for is really, really drawing out this battle. Maybe making it so the Imperials can't bombard sufficiently to make a landing. But the Imperials can always move to here and attack this again and add that to their territories for this war. And then also there's the destruction of all these outposts, which should get them enough glory to push to the next war, to the next whatever. Anyway, it's looking like a definite Imperial victory in the long run. Yeah. And I made some initial errors with the Terrans in terms of the initial builds, those fighters, that first attack. I knew I shouldn't attack, but it was the first chance that they had to do so, and the Imperials were beginning to get a higher production, and that means the end, basically. So I don't know what else could have been done, and it could have fallen out okay. So we'll see if this turns around. But I had expected a longer feeling game than this. I didn't think it would turn this quickly. I'm not sure how that was going to happen. And when I started to see this stalemate, I thought, oh, there we go. There's how it happens. But you attacked her in a stalemate situation and you weaken yourself. And both sides did it. But the Imperials have come out ahead. Especially, one of the things that was huge was what looked like a negative, having this fleet, having a large fleet, not this one, but having a large fleet pushed off map, gave them the money to build a bigger fleet so that they could take advantage of the Terran failure. Now, on the other hand, if the Terrans had managed to conquer, a new homeworld, essentially, and had that additional 8-point production, that would swing things very strongly in their position, in their favor, and this whole area would be cut off and free game for them. They would own that as long as they held this spot. Of course, they have to hold that spot and, something over here. So, I don't know. They're definitely in a rough shape, I think, to start. But we'll see. I'm having a good time with this one. So here we are in the third war, and the Teran took their first turn, and many of their units are disrupted. They couldn't afford the maintenance on their entire fleet. That means when it does get attacked, it's going to be a little weaker than you'd expect. But I think they did the best thing that they could in building it up, spending what they could to maintain it. They're down to 0 now. We'll see if Seoul holds out, or if I get a breakout invasion Earth. I don't have it here. And the Imperial attack on Earth has begun. They have an advantage with this space right here, the Nuxu Dusham. Because it's a dual primary secondary, they're actually allowed to base ships at the secondary and not have to pay support for them, and then just roll for it, just like frontier support. And that's what they did in order to barely, I mean, they had to put 8 points of ships into there, plus the monitor. And then they swept in and actually got lucky, and everything succeeded in its role. So they've got a major invasion, 4 different ground units, including a couple jump troops, and an outpost. So if anything can crack it, it's this. We'll see if it can. So here's the initial lineup of ships. The Imperials have more ships, so they can screen some of those. Those aren't involved in the battle. But let's look at what we got. We got strike cruisers facing up against the monitors for the most part. Here we got a strike cruiser facing a missile boat. As we go down, the little markers next to there are to indicate disrupteds, because I don't want to have counters flipped over at this point. We got the fighters facing off against each other, and then a destroyer facing a squadron of fighters. Is an attack cruiser? No, it's a heavy cruiser facing a missile boat, and then some of my light cruisers facing missile boats as well. The idea of being there, the missile boats are so dangerous that I want to put things that I don't mind losing as much, that won't have as much firepower effect, and they're likely to kill the missile boat at the same time. Alright, let's roll this all up, and I'll show you what happens after the battle. I'm suspecting that this more or less is the end of the game, but we'll see. And there's the results of the first firing. This was at missile range. It did not go well for the Terrans, even places where they had even shots. Down here and here you can see there's holes in their line. I don't think they managed to injure a single Imperial ship, and they lost a number, including a monitor. Just one? Yeah. So we'll see if they can close to beam range. So the die roll, +1 for the Terrans, and ended up tied. That means it's going to be a missile range fight followed by a beam range fight. Now, one thing I didn't mention, these guys were upside down. They did high intensity missile attacks, so they're out of missiles. They can't fire at the long range any longer. And after that missile range, now we're going to be at close range with the same pair-offs. We see that there's almost nothing left. All these Imperial ships went for intensive missile fire, knowing that they'd be facing those monitors, so they were able to wipe them out. We're talking about a 14-8. They only needed a 4 with 2 dice. One of them's likely to come up with 4. They got lucky. I mean, probably one of the monitors should have survived. It didn't happen. So now they don't have to face really anything. Fighters out of missiles and disordered, and a missile boat which has no beam factor. So we'll see what happens, but it looks pretty hopeless. So I lied. I looked at the rules. You were allowed to divide, reposition the ships. So they did. They wiped out the fighter. Now I've got to roll for range again because the missile boat actually survived. And at this point, the Terrans, they still want to stay, and they still want to try to reduce. They still want to fight because they have no other choice. But I got to check for range, and the missile boat wants long range. So let's see. Imperials get a 6. They get a 6. It's going to be short range followed by long range. That's not going to bode well. The missile ship is dead, but we'll see what happens. Well, indeed, the Imperials won, but they flipped over so many ships for the bombardment, doing the intensive missile fire, that they don't want to do a planetary bombardment. They're going to wait and do that during their reaction combat, the second combat phase. I think that's for the best. It accelerates their chances of winning a battle there. There's nothing really that the Terrans can do with a handful of transports, so there's no real harm here. So now we're at the ground combat, and the Imperials added a regular infantry unit in to give them the heavy weapon support so they don't have to undergo first fire from the planet. And they're using jump troops against the ground unit. They have to commit to both. And that's going to be a +2 on the ground unit table. But they undergo a first fire at -2. So the first fire does not kill them. The +2 wipes out the Teran ground unit. And now here, oh no, yeah, there is a first fire there. I have 11, 12, 13. Now this is a special rule to enable planets, the homeworld, to be attacked. Normally these would be each individual attacks, but I'm allowing a summing just for this. And the homeworld is allowed to shoot one of these back. So it's going to fire back here at the +4 table. This is going to automatically kill this thing. But at the same time, 11, 12, 13, I'm at +3, which allows me to automatically kill that. So now I can drop an outpost here, and it's now a conquered territory. So I was going to throw it in, but I decided, what the hell, I might as well finish it up. The Teran, because there is a chance that this planet could resurrect, as it were, if the war ends. And the Imperials don't have another outpost to place yet. So the Teran player took their turn and collected up cash. They have nothing they can do with it. They could build ships, but they have nowhere to place them if they get built. So they just pulled their transports back and are hoping for the best at this point, which probably isn't too good. The Imperials rolled an Imperial succession and a civil war. They're going to ignore the civil war. That reduces their income base by 3. So from now on, they only get 11 per turn in Imperial income. That seems a minor cost compared to having to send a fleet out. And now I'll compute what happens. This huge fleet, though, is sitting at an outpost, which means it's doing frontier maintenance, and most of it probably is not going to be working well. And Alpha Centauri fell as well. So that's not to the bitter end. I still have to conquer all these, but there is absolutely no chance of the Terrans being able to regain a production base at this point. So it's game over. I think I made some mistakes with Sol. I'm not sure whether or not that attack here was a horrible idea, but it's definitely where the game took a bad move, was taking the offensive. The problem I have, and I wrote this in a reply to someone online, if the Terrans can't take the offensive early, it's just going to get harder, because the Imperial appeals will get the Imperials more and more treasury points. And the Imperials can produce and build themselves a much larger addition in terms of productivity with those 1-point outposts than the Terrans can with their 1-point outposts. The Terrans need to take another planet. And as long as this bottleneck is there, sure, you could send a Terran fleet up this way, maybe gain a planet and a win that way, but in terms of you win one victory going this other direction, and now maybe you'll get another productive planet, and the whole balance shifts if that happens. The problem I have with that is the Imperial forces should be able to take one of the Terran planets early on if the Terran fleet's not available. And that's kind of what we saw. Question I have is whether or not this was legal, whether or not this planet should have remained non-productive, or if that was me misinterpreting the rules. It's hard to tell whether it's not clear in the rules whether an ungarrisoned planet that's been taken by the enemy recovers immediately or has to go through the normal cost. There's also the question of whether or not it recovers immediately or recovers at the end of the war. None of these things are absolutely clear in the rules. I don't think they really matter. I think the game. I mean, that was a mistake on my part with the Imperials. I definitely would have brought an outpost, would have planned for one, had I realized, oh wow, I'm going to win the war and not be able to garrison that, and that's bad. I didn't realize I was going to win the war. I thought I had a turn to bring an outpost up there. And it just turned out, no, the war was ending too quickly. Anyway, I think it was very interesting. I'll be back for a recap. I'm going to do that on a separate video because this one is pretty full.